As the official healthcare provider of Minnesota United, Allina Health is dedicated to delivering pro-level care for our Loons. But our partnership goes much deeper than what happens on the field. From our shared support of youth-focused nonprofits like Roots for the Home Team to empowering adaptive athletes through the MNUFC Power Soccer Team, Allina Health and Minnesota United are committed to making our communities all together better. Learn more at allinahealth.org/loons. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Sound of the Loons, presented by Allina Health. And this time, I get to be joined by the gentleman that I have seen way too much of this season. Way too much of. And normally the only time we're on a screen together is a Zoom call with a coach or a player. But now we're on a Zoom call and on the screen here to do Sound of the Loons. It's my broadcast partner, Tyler Terens. Thanks for taking time out of your busy golf schedule to join me today.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I was wondering when I was going to get the invite onto this podcast, similar to when I was going to get the invite to your house after we'd done about 17 Minnesota games already this year. But as expected at this point, it was a little bit late, but I got the invite nonetheless. So I'm glad to be here.
Well, everybody else turned me down this week, so. But I do appreciate, you even decided not to golf today just to come on. I know that's not the real truth, but I'm going to throw it to that.
Let's roll with that.
We'll roll with that. But yeah, you and I just got back from St. Louis. Wait, is that where we were? Yeah, it was St. Louis,
St.
right?
Louis. Yeah,
it was St. Louis.
Yeah.
I literally had to think about that for a second. We're heading to Chicago for a game on Wednesday, Chicago against Orlando City, and then back here to Minnesota on the weekend. So we're going to sort of just, talk about the league, recap what's going on. We'll dive a little bit into Minnesota United because it's good to get somebody else's perspective, because I've been in and around this team for a long time now, much like you had been around Chicago, and maybe your view starts to get a little skewed because you're just like so in it. So it's always good to get a subjective outside view. But first and foremost, how are you enjoying the season?
It's been good. It kind of, you and I have talked about this. It kind of like felt like an extension of last season. It didn't really feel like a new year, just because of how long the MLS season is. And I think that, when we talk to family and friends, like, I don't think anybody realizes just how long this season is. It's definitely longer than baseball. And then you throw Leagues Cup in there, that adds another month in. But no, it's been great. And, there's been so many storylines this year, and, I've been lucky enough to do so many minutes. I give you a lot of crap for coming to Minnesota a lot, but like, I genuinely mean this. Like, I've been there so much now that I'm starting to get all of the hype. I lived in Chicago for 3 years. And then like, when you hear of big time Midwest cities, you don't really hear Cincinnati, which is where I live now, but that's okay, just from a sheer like size standpoint. But I've been really lucky to experience Allianz a lot this year, experience the Twin Cities in general. And I think that like I'm starting to see some really good stuff out of the club, and then also just really a lot of good Western Conference soccer as well. I think that you and I have talked a lot about how the West is so tight, and there's probably like 12 teams that are in the mix all to get to the playoffs, let alone challenge for the Western Conference title. And then the East is just so top heavy. So like we've seen a lot of really good games, regardless of who Minnesota is playing. And then when we see the East, it's different because it's jam-packed towards the mid to the bottom of the table, not necessarily towards the top. But this season has been good so far. It's been a lot of fun, and I guess it's been fun working with you. I don't know. Jury's still out.
Yeah, the jury's still out. Exactly. I get it. You can't say too many bad things now that I had you to my house. So you gotta be, that's like kind of softened. I was just eating some of the chocolate things that you brought over. We still have some.
You're welcome. Yeah, and you were trying to make me take those home on a flight back with me to Cincinnati.
I was. Those won't get confiscated. Yeah. But speaking of the West and the East, because I feel like last year everybody felt, and maybe this has been a couple years going now, that the East has been better top to bottom. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm always so inundated with the West, having come from Minnesota United, that I was maybe a little bit biased because that's just who I see more closely.
Yeah.
Whereas I do feel like this year it's kind of flipped the script, and it maybe even started going that way last season. Am I wrong on that?
Um, no, you're not wrong. I've always been more of a fan of the way Western Conference teams will play, and I don't know what it is because I actually, just because I'm a total dork with this stuff, I went back and looked at like Western and Eastern Conference NBA and MLS teams because I feel like in the West the NBA gets the like connotation of being wild, wild west and scoring a lot of points and not playing any defense. And I kind of feel the same way sometimes in soccer with Major League Soccer. So like I kind of went back. There was no correlation after my study, but I've felt like the West has always been more attractive because they're more expansive. They want to go after games. The East has always been, for whatever reason, just a little bit more like, hunkered down, try to grind out points. But Columbus has changed that. Obviously, Miami has changed that. Cincinnati has changed that. But when you look down the line, I mean, Philadelphia has been underperforming this year for the most part, but I think that Jim Curtin and company will come good on that. But then like Red Bulls and their style, Charlotte's been grinding out results. Toronto's been a surprise this year under John Herdman. So like I've always been more of a fan of the way that the West plays, but I agree with you. I think that it's started to switch from an overall standpoint, but it's difficult to turn your nose up at the likes of what Philly have done for the past several years, what NYCFC have done up until last year. I mean, those two teams basically were in the Eastern Conference Final 3 years straight. And then also what Cincinnati has built, what Columbus has built, and obviously Miami for these few years that they'll have Messi and the Barca boys. But yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I think that the West is like Vancouver's in 7th place, and I could see Vancouver getting to a Western Conference final. Houston is in 8th place if they do well in the summer transfer window and actually get a striker, because as you and I have covered that team a lot, they just exist without a striker. They somehow won a trophy last year and got to a conference final. And then the LA teams are fantastic. And Minnesota's, what they've been doing. And RSL is, I think, the best team in the conference right now, but not by a lot. So there's a lot to be excited by. And then the two Cascadia teams, Seattle and Portland, are in 9th and 10th place, respectively. So, like, there's just more depth in the West, to be fair. And not for nothing, the two worst teams in the league by far are in the Eastern Conference in Chicago and New England. So I'm just going to throw that in there as well.
Yeah, I don't know if I would have pegged that with New England going in. I don't know why I didn't, because they were such a mess last year, but maybe I just thought the quality of Carlos Heel and
They were in 2nd place when Bruce Arena
I
when Bruce
know.
Arena
Well,
left.
that's but that was when he left,
Yeah,
and then they just looked, and then they still had to like pick up the pieces. And, we talk about coaches that are on the hot seat, and some people were mentioning New England. I'm like, you can't really do that to Caleb Porter yet. Like, it's his first year and he got thrown into an absolute dumpster fire. Like, I just feel like you need a little time.
yeah,
So,
yep,
but yeah, I've always kind of viewed the Eastern Conference as maybe a little bit more like blue collar
yep.
than maybe the Western Conference, and that's not a negative by any means, but yeah, it's been fun. And then sometimes you go into these games, like, I mean, not to like, you know, pull back the curtain on my research here, but like I hadn't like deep dived into Orlando City, and we've got them against Chicago. Like I got back from St. Louis, and I'm like, Memorial Day weekend, what? Like, no, like I've got to like literally sit down and
Yeah.
really hone in on Orlando City, because
Hmm.
it's one thing to know their results and like their roster, and it's another thing to like really study in. And because I didn't cover the Eastern Conference prior, too, when I was with Minnesota United, I don't even know if I had Orlando City once last year. So, and I've always really respected Oscar Pereira as a coach. So it was just like, there's certain games we get all of a sudden that I'm like, oh shoot, like I know what their results are and I kind of see what everybody's doing every week. But if you really want to know how they're playing and what they're doing, it takes a little time, because people are
Yeah.
like, what do you do for your job? How do you do that? What do you mean you have a board? Like, what does that look like? I'm like, so it's always a little bit different when if you ever go to career day or something, people are
Yeah.
like, oh, that's awesome.
Oh, you don't just roll out of bed and start talking for 2 hours.
No,
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
no, not usually. I try not to do that. I try to come somewhat prepared. So let's talk about Minnesota United, because I know that's what a lot of people that are going to be listening to this and watching this want to know about and get your perspective on this club. And I was even just listening to the Extra Time podcast. I was taking my dog for a walk, and I was like, okay, I'm going to listen to Michael Boxall was on with Andrew Wiebe, and just kind of getting, sometimes it's good too for a player like Michael Boxall to talk to somebody else and hear their perspective and the question somebody else asks him, because I've talked to him so many different times. What is your take on this Minnesota United team before Eric Ramsey came, at the, during the preseason? We could talk about, just Cameron Knowles and what he did, and now that you've seen him a few times, what's your take?
I mean, from the get-go, it's been a breath of fresh air for everybody, right? Anybody you talk to at Allianz, staff members, communications people, players, breath of fresh air in terms of the style of play and actually being able to be on the front foot and go for games, right? So right off the bat, I think everybody was excited, but that could be in a less than ideal world. It could be simply as new as a new coach bump, right? Because that's just what it is. It's a new style. A change is as good as a vacation, as good as a rest. And so like this could have been something where for the first couple of games, it's nice, it's different. The guys were receptive to it and they rattled off a couple of wins and it could have all gone south. However, what I think that we're seeing, and I think we started to see the fruits of Eric Ramsey's tactical labors, was the Charlotte game, switching to a 3-back on the road and executing a game plan. And I think that was a signal to the Loon fans that like he's got them bought in, where he can change the system. And you and I will sometimes talk about formations and we need to get it into our producers for graphic purposes, and everybody gets hung up on that. But the cliche that's coming out of coaches' mouths now is that like it's about principles and philosophies. It's not about formations. That the formation, yes, is going to dictate how we set up and what it looks like as soon as we kick off, but like they're still playing the same way. It's still Eric Ramsey's club. It's still the Minnesota United of 2024. But I think on a more important level, it's like, okay, they were able to execute these little tweaks, Kervin Arriaga being slid into a right back position. And for me, there's two huge players that I think are not getting their flowers. Mickey Tapias and Joseph Rosales. I think Mickey Tapias has been nothing short of outstanding. I can't remember where he's put a wrong foot this season so far. And if he did, he recovers for it or somebody cleans it up.
It was his second yellow card in the last game we did.
Yes, and
that was the only wrong foot.
But you and I and everybody that I talked to who watched that game didn't even notice or didn't even see that he had gotten a yellow card after the scuffle.
I know, but I'm just saying, like, if he made a stupid mistake, that was like literally it this season.
Agreed. And then Joseph Rosales is, as far as the Western Conference goes, of teams that we've seen so far, and who have we not seen? Colorado, Dallas, San Jose so far in the West. He might be
Vancouver.
And Vancouver. He might be the most versatile player that we've seen so far in the Western Conference this year, and potentially in MLS. His ability to cut inside when he's playing as either a fullback or a wingback, his ability to really just stretch the opponent, on top of the fact that like we've seen him chase down some of the fastest players in MLS, and we joked about it on the broadcast. When who did he chase down? Juan David Mosquera.
I don't know. It was somebody ridiculous on the right-hand side.
And like this dude is a baller. His feet are incredible. So between those two, and then Michael Boxall's done what he's done the entire time, and I think he loves playing next to the likes of Mickey and Joe and Devin Padelford and whoever might be back there. But like Eric talks about it all the time. We hear them talk about it on Wrap Up, on the Countdown Show, on 360. This is the collective for Minnesota United. It is nothing more than that. It's nothing less than that. And sure, Robin Lod's going to have the majority of the goals and assists in the whole thing. But like, for me, those two players, and on top of the fact that like Eric Ramsey from day one has taken what Cameron Knowles started to lay the foundations of, and then got the guys to buy in for his philosophy and his mentality, which I think was kind of close to what Cameron was doing.
But I think that kind of trickled down from Khaled. I think that there was sort of like a mandate there that
in terms of how they wanted to play and
how they wanted to play. Yes, the Cameron, and then, but everybody was buying in and excited about it.
But that's difficult. That's difficult to see as a fan, and that's even difficult to see as commentators, whether or not that's actually where like the sporting director decides the way that they want to play, and then you go out and get a coach who fits that, or the other way around.
Yeah.
But I agree. Like the whole thing before, pre Adrian Heath, pre Eric Ramsey, and pre Khaled, like this was a totally different club. And the fact that it's been turned around in this is sort of like the FC Cincinnati of the West right now. And it wasn't as dire in Minnesota in terms of putting back-to-back wooden spoons. But that's the way that I'm looking at it in terms of a facelift for a club from a sporting director and a coaching standpoint and having instantaneous success.
Yeah, and I think too when I think that, that Charlotte game was like a total revelation because I don't think anybody expected them to play that way and that formation to come out in that way. And I think it caught everybody off guard. And the fact that they did it so like flawlessly and then got such an impressive win. I think that was like really the moment that probably turned a lot of people's heads at it. They maybe hadn't noticed yet, like what Minnesota was all about. And we've asked Eric Ramsey about not just that game, but other games where he's tweaked it a little bit and changed and like, but he goes back every time to the principles and saying it's not about the formation and the formation's not really that different. And Kervin Arriaga moving to a center back role was probably the biggest tweak of that, just because that's a position he hadn't played, which I thought was actually genius because it just allows Kervin to focus on like one thing, and that's defending rather than having to be like scatterbrained all over the place and have to, choose too many options. And then I'm with you on Rosales, but I think a huge piece of it too is just, and I don't know if I've said this before on other podcasts. I don't know if it's just being a woman. Like I'm more like I key in more on body language and emotions and like confidence and how someone makes you feel and how that then affects the way you do something, whether it's playing a sport or whether it's broadcasting or whatever it is that you do in your life. And I think that these guys have they have been instilled with confidence. And you talk about the young players and getting opportunities, and just because they have a bad moment or a bad game or whatever, like there's this confidence that's built and a true belief in the academy guys and the twos and participating, like they believe like there's a true pathway. So I think it's been fun to watch. And even somebody like Franco Fragapane, which, even last year he didn't play a ton. And he always kind of had a little bit of a tude, when he wasn't playing or when he'd get taken off the field. And now he comes, like, I just feel like he's totally bought into what this group is doing and what's being asked of him. And other huge piece of it is communication, just having things communicated to you properly, like, this is what my expectations are for you. This is why I'm making this decision. This is why you're not starting. This is what you need to do to start. Like, just the conversations that are being had, I think, makes a big difference with players. And so anyways, and you and I have been to a couple training sessions and whatnot, and we'll have Minnesota again on Saturday against Sporting Kansas City, which will be another great test. But I think they are at LAFC tomorrow night on Wednesday. So that'll be a good one. That'll be a good one for them, I think, to kind of continue on. I mean, and when they do lose or not even when they lose, but when they get a result or they get a draw, it's also like somewhat refreshing to just like hear that, okay, yeah, we get like, that is not how I wanted to get that point. Or no, that's not the level we want to be at. I'm not happy with how we finished that game, even though we got the 3 points, like whatever it is. I feel like the expectation and the standard is just higher. When we hear the interviews and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Okay. So I kind of feel like I feel like now we've like spent all this time talking about Minnesota United that we need to talk a little bit, and we talked about the rest of the league, which is great, to kind of go over it. But if I had to put you on the spot right now and you had to tell me who the top four are in the Western Conference come to the end of the season, would you even be able to do it with the way this looks, with the way this goes? Who do you think it will be?
You're talking about just finishing in the top four.
Top four in the Western Conference. I mean, if you think you know who's going to win the West, you can give me an order, but
I think it's exactly as you see it. Not in order, but those will be the four teams.
Okay.
I think the Galaxy, I think that their talent, we haven't seen the best of the Galaxy yet.
Mm-hmm.
They have 7 draws. And that's for a team that's super expansive and likes to go after the game. I think Greg Vanney is like licking his chops at the fact that like he's got a summer transfer window. I don't know how much cap space and how much room they have to make some acquisitions and stuff like that. But LAFC, I mean, Olivier Giroud's coming in. I don't really need to say anything more than that. And I'm not saying that RSL and Minnesota are going to start to play poorly, but you might see both LA teams start to rip up this Western Conference and perhaps finish in number 1 and number 2. I like the Galaxy to get to MLS Cup from day one. And I that was a correct prediction, I think, at this point in the season. In the East, and I know you're probably going to ask me about it in a second, I was wrong about Atlanta. I thought that they were going to have a stellar season, but such is not the case. But yeah, I think that the top four in the West, RSL, Minnesota, and the two LA teams, I think that that's what it's going to look like. Not in that order, but those will be the top four teams when it's all said and done.
I kind of feel like a lot of people would have gotten the top four wrong in the East if whatever they predicted at the beginning of the season. I mean, I just think the East has been kind of a conundrum. I mean, maybe
Outside of
Miami and
NYC,
Cincinnati.
outside of NYCFC though, I don't know. I
Yeah,
would have.
that's true. Columbus snuck back in there because when they were in CONCACAF Champions Cup heavy, they were out of it. I
Yeah.
don't know if I would have pegged Toronto to be as good as they are. I know Herdman but that was such a mess last year. That was
Oh
like,
God, yeah.
I mean, that was, oh,
I did their game, the second game after the vaping incident. And like I interviewed Bob Bradley before the game for Apple TV, and the whole vibe at the club was just talk about body language and like, going out and doing your job. And they played a disgusting 0-0 draw against the Chicago Fire of all teams, who we have on Wednesday night. But yeah, that was a mess. But John Herdman, he's a really interesting dude. And I know we haven't gotten to talk to him, but I interviewed him for Sirius XM FC earlier in the season. He's a really, really interesting guy. And he's one of those guys that you want to talk to and you'll want to run for him. And lo and behold, Lorenzo Insigne and Federico Bernardeschi, when they're healthy, they want to run for him. He had Bernardeschi playing as a wingback in a couple of games and emptying the tank, running like 7 or 8 kilometers. And you're just like, all right, John Herdman might actually be a really, really good coach. And he's not just a flash in the pan with the Canadian national team.
yeah, I mean, and Bernardeschi wasn't even scoring in those games. He was just doing a lot of running. He didn't start scoring until lately, so he was just like doing a lot more defending than he was attacking in some of those games. And then I just want to hit on, this is like another crazy, I feel like every year, every summer, I'm like, oh, it's a summer of soccer, all the big tournaments going on, and some are related to MLS, like Leagues Cup, and some aren't, or we have a World Cup or whatever it might be going on. What do you think about specifically Copa America and the MLS players that have been called in? Like, do you think when you look at Canada, I'm not sure what to make of Canada. I love Jesse Marsch. I think he's a fabulous hire. I think he's going to be great for the Canadian men's national team. Dayne St is clearly one of the players that got called in. This might be the first year ever, I think, or first time ever that Dayne's been called in and he's like legit fighting for the number one spot.
Yeah.
Because even when Crépeau broke his leg and he didn't go to the World Cup, I think Dayne was still then number 3, at that moment in time.
Yeah.
So when you look at what Canada is and the MLS players that got called in, which they have quite a few, and then also Dayne St. Clair in that mix, what do you see from Canada in this Copa America?
I'm as curious as everybody else is because they have a lot of talent. And I love the way that they played at the World Cup, which was reckless abandon. And that's just my personality and who I am at my core. So I love that. Play the way that you're going to play, regardless of who the opponent is. And they got killed for it. And that's a lesson learned for them. And that was in the John Herdman era. But now, when Jesse Marsch was close to getting the US job, and from what I heard, there was a lot of different things that went into it, and you heard that Jesse didn't really get treated all that well, but above all else, like his style is a very unique one, and it's closer to John Herdman than it is to Greg Berhalter. That's for damn sure. So when you look at the likes of like Alphonso Davies, and Derek Cornelius and Tejan Buchanan, and these guys who are playing abroad and are on really good European teams, mixed with the likes of Richie Larea, Kamal Miller, Dayne St. Clair, Jonathan Osorio, Mathieu Chouanier, like Ish Kone, who's at Watford and hasn't made a ton of appearances, but still like he was lights out under Wilfred Nancy at Montreal. This is a group that could definitely do some damage. The question is, what is it going to look like stylistically, and how quickly will the guys be able to buy in? Because you and I hear all the time about how difficult it is to be a national team coach, because you get the guys into camp, like 7 or 8 times throughout the course of the year. And January camp is typically for your B team anyway. So let's call it 7. And it's difficult to implement a style and tactics. But these guys have been playing together for a while, the Stefano Stacchios of the world. Like, I think Canada, based upon where they finish in the group and then who they draw in the knockout round, there's no reason from a talent standpoint why they can't get to a quarterfinal. But again, it's just a matter of like, Jesse Marsch's style is a demanding one. And if I'm very curious for him to see if he'll tweak it and adjust it based upon the fact that it's tournament football and not 38 games playing in the Premier League. Like, you know, and I know he didn't even get that long with Leeds, but something along those lines. So this is a good team. Yeah, and they were the best team in World Cup qualifiers, Kyndra, heading into
Well, that's
2020.
what I'm saying. I loved how they looked when they qualified. I
Yeah.
didn't love as much like how it turned out in the World Cup, but I do love how they looked in the qualifiers, and they clearly had a ton of confidence. And then obviously you make a coaching change and whatnot. But I think the bigger question will be like, how much do they sort of give into the pressure of being on in essentially home soil, having the Copa America, here, and the pressure of being a new head coach in Jesse March. I know he's been there, done that, and handled pressure. I mean, coaching over in Europe is no easy task, especially being an American coaching in Europe, and then what he did with the Red Bulls. But you have such a short time, or I'm going to ask Dayne when he's coming up in the next segment, is how much communication have you had with Jesse March? You and I saw Dayne right after the announcement was made, and they basically just had like one group call because it was so new. But I wonder, is Jesse Marsh sending these guys information, video of how he wants them to play? Are they having calls? Because their time is so short. They have this June camp. They have a couple friendlies. And then, oh, by the way, you open Copa America against Argentina. So
There's no amount of packets or tactical information that they could send them to properly prepare you for Argentina with a new head coach. There's
right,
nothing that he could send them.
right.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. But then, you look at their second game, they're playing against Peru, who's always a tough out, but not nearly as strong as they have been in the past. And then their third game is against Chile, who's another good team, not the Chile of the past that we remember with Alexis Sanchez and everything like that. But tough. It's Copa America. This isn't Gold Cup. It's not Nations League. This is Copa America. Every game is going to be difficult for the most part. So I'm fascinated, and not for nothing, Kyndra, but like the South American teams are going to get so much love everywhere that they go for the most part. And obviously they do a good job of picking cities that are incredibly diverse, that have heavy populations of those teams that are playing there. Like between the United States, Argentina, Mexico, the Brazils, the Uruguays, like those teams are the ones that are like Canada is going to be an afterthought for most people. So they're going to have to generate their own sort of support and their own confidence just based upon what's going on in their camp, not based upon anything else. Because I don't know if Canada men's national team travels well in Copa America, but we're about to find out.
All right, and then U.S. Greg Berhalter, second round. Does his employment depend on how he does in this Copa America? Do you think he'll get to the 2026 World Cup regardless? And then also any MLS players that weren't included on this roster that you thought would have been? The three MLS players included are Sean Johnson, Miles Robinson, and Timothy Tillman.
No, I don't think that there's anybody that's been left off that deserves to be there. I mean, all the guys that play abroad now are so good, and it's really difficult to
like, who are they going to take the place of?
Exactly. And I think that we saw the last of that with the World Cup roster in 2022 when we had some guys that maybe shouldn't have been there, but you could see the level was a significant drop off. But as far as Greg's job and everything like that, I mean, I'm hearing all the same stuff you're hearing. He doesn't get out of the group stage, there's going to be a lot of conversations to be had. But my thing is, and this is the point that I've been trying to make, is like, okay, well, what's the goal?
Yeah.
He keeps his job if he gets out of the group stage. How long are we going to go on like that? Where the only goal for the men's team is to get out of the group stage, and that is the measure of success. Whether it's
but I don't think they're just saying keeps his job until 2026, like not like. This isn't like indefinitely, but what do you gain by firing him? And then you're starting over from scratch, heading into the biggest World Cup for the United States since '94 when they hosted it last, right? You know what I'm saying?
I don't know. There's a pretty good German coach who's looking for a job who just left Liverpool, who's available, and not for nothing, he's not going to be unemployed for too long. He said he's never going to coach in England again, but that doesn't mean that there's not 10 countries and 50 clubs who would love to employ him. So if Greg flames out, I throw the bag at Jurgen Klopp and say, go ahead. And especially the relationship that he has with Gio Reyna, with Christian Pulisic, having been at Borussia Dortmund. Like, I'm not saying I want Greg to get fired so that Jurgen Klopp can come in. But what I'm saying is like, there are other options out there. And we as a federation made a conscious decision to ignore every possible option out there and roll with the same guy that we had been rolling with for a while. We had an option to say, Greg, thank you for your service, getting us back to the World Cup, putting us back on the global stage. And we decided to roll with him. And
yeah, but I mean, that's a different thing than saying we ignored every other option. Like saying they chose to go again with Greg Berhalter and saying they ignored every other option.
I mean, those two are the same thing in my mind. You're ignoring
no, I don't think.
options.
I don't think that's ignoring them. They did like a full-fledged interview process. Like I know I've heard some other stuff from your sources and I don't know how accurate they are. So I'm just gonna leave it there. Okay, how about this? What kind of results do the United States get at Copa? And then we'll wrap it up.
I think we get out of the group stage and lose in the round of 16.
And Greg keeps his job.
Probably. Yeah.
That'll be what happens if they get out of the group stage and then he still gets fired. I'm just saying because that's been like the measuring stick.
I know. I think his job is 100% safe if he gets out of the group stage. If he doesn't, I think it's very much 50-50, if not going the other way. But again, what is our standard as the men's national team? What is our standard? Because for the women's side, I know where the standard is. It's win World Cups or bust. And that's the way that it should be for the men's side as well. I know it's a totally different entity and game, but like we need to up our standards as the men's team. Like
it's much easier to have that standard when you've already won multiple World Cups.
Agreed. Hey, we got third place in a World Cup back in
the men's has a ways to go, but all I know is I'm looking forward to it. We've got a lot going on this summer. Of course, the MLS season continues. I can't believe we're already at match day 17 coming up midweek. It's technically the halfway point of the regular season with the 34 games, but then Leagues Cup thrown in the middle and Copa America. And it's like, I feel like before you know it, it's going to be September and we'll still have 2 months of the season left, but it'll feel like we're back into fall. So yeah, it'll be good. It'll be busy. And we'll have you on again, maybe like 2/3 of the way through the season or some point during Leagues Cup. Because we have a Minnesota United Leagues Cup game, yes?
I believe we do. Yes, we do.
I believe we do. We'll have to take another gander at the schedule. So, well, thank you for joining me. Enjoy the flight tonight. I hope it's on time. And hopefully you don't have to connect just to get to Chicago. I mean, it seems like you got to connect everywhere to get out of Cincinnati.
I'll tell you what, living in Cincinnati and trying to get to Kansas City and St. Louis, I never thought it would be so difficult, but here we are. But thanks for having me, Kyndra. I had a blast.
All right. Thanks, Tyler. Talk to you soon. I'll see you tomorrow. All right, everybody. Segment number 2 with Dayne St. Clair coming up right after this. As the official healthcare provider of Minnesota United, Allina Health is responsible for keeping our Loons ready for game day with industry-leading sports medicine and orthopedic care. But our award-winning care does not stop there. Because true well-being requires good physical and mental health, the mental health team at Allina is also there for you with a variety of programs and services featuring more than 300 mental health professionals. Allina Mental Health Services helps ensure you stay at the top of your game. Talk to your healthcare provider or call the Mental Health and Addiction Connection line, 866-603-0016, for any mental health service, question, or concern 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. All right, everybody, welcome back to segment number 2 of Sound of the Loons, presented by Allina Health. And now I get to be joined by goalkeeper Dayne St. Clair, who has been kind enough to join us on the road in Los Angeles. Busy week for you guys, going straight from Colorado to Los Angeles. How are you, Dayne? How has your lovely trip to Los Angeles been?
Yeah, it's been weird because normally, I mean, we come out 2 days earlier, so everyone's like so used to today being the game day, but having 2 training sessions has been nice and definitely a lot easier than going back to Minnesota after Denver and then coming back out here. So I think having the extra days has been nice and the weather's been good. So just acclimatizing to that as well.
Nice. Well, and I know it's always tricky when you do the West Coast trips, but it's like you're already halfway there heading to Colorado. Then you have to, you're trying to adjust to the altitude, and then you're going the rest of the way to Los Angeles just to have that a couple extra days and time to adjust a little bit rather than making that trip back home. So when you guys left Colorado, I wanted to talk about that result really quick because first of all, the season has been actually you characterize it. How's the season been in your mind? I was going to say what I thought, but you tell me what you think from a result standpoint. How would you gauge the season?
Yeah, I think it's been positive. Of course, there was a lot of chaos in the off season, and even to start the season of a lot of uncertainty. So I think the players have done a great job, as well as Eric, really getting us to buy into the system. And I think obviously the last game we didn't necessarily play the way we wanted to, but to be able to still get points on the board is something that's definitely valuable.
You've had you talk about the chaos, you talk about the change, maybe the uncertainty heading into preseason. You and I have talked about that before on previous podcasts, you know, with the interim and the interim to the interim and then the head coach and a new sporting director, but also a new goalkeeping coach for you. What has that been like for you having Cristiano as stepping in from, did he come from the second team or the academy?
He was from the academy, yeah.
So how has that been for you? Just a total adjustment, I'm assuming. I mean, nobody's really quite like Stuart Kerr. So how has Cristiano been for you?
Yeah, for sure. I think he's been excellent. I think his dedication day in, day out, I think is really positive and showing it through. And I think he wants it just as bad as I do, if not even more at times. And I think his passion really shows. And I think obviously the South American style is a lot different than the English style. So just being able to adjust that and kind of learn a couple new things. And he's really been really excellent and really hope to continue to working with him in the future.
Well, and that's what's crazy is we talk about the adjustment that you guys have gone through as players, but even for some of these coaches, the adjustment and the kind of fly by the seat of your pants, Cristiano being one of them, having come up from the goal, you know, the academy. And then even we talked about Cameron Knowles and you talk about, you know, Fernando Adi, and you talk about all these guys that have just been like all hands on deck. Some of them stayed with the first team. Some of them went back down to the twos or to the academy, but just sort of the rotation. Does that sort of unify, solidify a team? Like, what would you say galvanize a group when you kind of have to go through things like this together?
Yeah, I think it's sports. It's you gotta take your opportunity whenever it comes, no matter how it comes. No one asks you how it comes or when it comes, but when you do get it, you've really got to take it. And I think Cristiano especially has been someone that's really grasped it. And I think the goalkeeping and the defense for the most part have done a good job. If you look at the statistics and things like that, and I know that he's been a big part of that. So looking forward to kind of hopefully continue to work with him in the future.
Okay, so you talk about just taking your opportunity when it comes. Copa America, Canada men's national team. I asked you briefly about it when I saw you at training a couple of weeks ago, because I think the Jesse Marsh announcement had like just come about. What since then has been the communication with Jesse Marsh? I just had Tyler Terens on, my broadcast partner, in the previous segment, and we were kind of talking about the Copa America and like Greg Berhalter and Jesse Marsh and Canada, the US, like what the expectations are. Like how challenging is it going to be going into a major tournament with a new head coach with the limited amount of time that you guys have together? It's hard enough when you have the same head coach from previous, but now to have a new one.
Yeah, for sure. I think even looking at the two friendlies we have against Netherlands and France, so definitely aren't easy competition. But I think it's going to be nice. I think the European guys are starting a few days earlier than the MLS guys that have been joining up there. So just to be able to get on the ground with him, of course. So we've all had our own conversations and kind of get a better understanding once we're really in the camp and immersed, and kind of see what his expectations are and the way that we're going to apply this new style of play. And just think buying in is going to be the biggest thing. But the games are going to be there at the certain dates, so it's just about how quickly can we adapt and adjust to the new style and the way that things are going to be moving.
So when you see a roster come out, obviously you knew ahead of time that you were going to be called in before like all of us get to hear about it, but you maybe see yourself like second on that depth chart. Is this the highest you've been on that depth chart, or, you know, because of just the movement of the pieces? I know going into the 2022 World Cup, you know, and then Crepeau broke his leg, and then it was like, I mean, what a ride for you and an experience. But do you view yourself as like, oh no, I'm not number two, I'm working for that starting role? Like what is your mentality?
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't say that I'm number two on the depth chart. I think even going into the last camp, talking with Moro and the way that they kind of viewed things at the time, it was that Max was going to play that game, but it wasn't necessarily that I'm necessarily the number two. So just been working hard this season. And I think obviously with the coaching change now, everything can flip on its head. So my mentality has just been to have the best that I can do and be able to kind of control it. And I think I know Max obviously very well, and we're both going to compete with each other and kind of push for that number one spot because we definitely both want it. But I also know that whoever the coach decides to play, that the next person will support them as well.
What does that look like for you when you talk about improving? Like, what is it? What is a goalkeeper like? What is your training regimen, whether it's in the off season, whether you're getting ready for the national team, whether you're looking to come, when you're coming back to Minnesota United? What does that look like for you when you're like, okay, at the end of the season, I'm going to evaluate. These are the things that I need to work on. This is what I'm going to come back stronger in these areas. What is that for you?
Yeah, for sure. I think in my position, first and foremost, it's a reactive position. So it's really hard to determine really that what you're going to be asked upon per game because we're not controlling that many actions. It's more so reacting to different things defensively, at least. But I think it's understanding the game model that the coach wants to play. I think that's kind of the biggest one for me is because I could say I want to pass the ball short every time, but if Eric wants me to kick the ball long every time, like you have to follow into the game plan. So I think first and foremost is the knowledge of what the expectations are from the coach and the style of play that we're going to play. And then I think, yeah, it's looking internally, okay, can I be more explosive? Can I be more aggressive on certain decisions? Or how's my relationship with the guys that are playing in front of me where we understand each other and we know in certain moments if Boxy's running against a guy in a breakaway, he's probably going to catch him because of his pace versus somebody else. You know what I mean? So I think it's just
you're not going to list somebody who's slow. You're like,
So it's just understanding who you're playing with and their strengths and how can we all work together to cover up our weaknesses, but also to enhance our strengths as well, so that people aren't even talking about our weaknesses.
Okay, so that's actually a good question. I know I want to talk to you more about Copa America and the national team, but just on that and even switching from the national team to your club team when you're playing with a different set of players, but you have had, and we ask Boxel all the time about the center back pairings, and he's had like a gazillion of them, but it's the same for you as far as who's in front of you. How much does that change the way you played? Not just who's in front of you, but the pairing in front of you, the formation in front of you. How much does that change? Do you like it with 3-5 in the back? Do you prefer 4, or does it depend on who's there? Like, what's your take from a goalkeeping perspective?
Yeah, I'm comfortable. I think as long as the ideas are clear of what the expectations are from each position, and I think obviously we've tried to be a lot more compact this year, which is I think helped us defensively because there's so many good players in this league that are so good at playing in the pockets and finding that pass. But if there's no real space for them to operate, or the guy's close enough that I can cover for somebody else that maybe made a mistake or the wrong decision in that moment, I think has helped us to defend as a unit versus just like you guys are the defenders, so you guys defend by your guys' selves and you guys figure it out. So I feel comfortable in any of the situations. I think obviously I played 3 at the back before the national team, before playing with Minnesota 3 at the back, so I was something I was kind of comfortable slotting into. But of course, growing up, we played a lot of 4 at the back, and obviously under Adrian, we played a lot of 4 at the back. So comfortable in both systems for sure.
You're not as old as me, where we played with a stopper and a sweeper, like a diamond. Before you've probably seen.
No, when I played center back when I was younger, I actually played. I was the stopper. So yeah.
Are you really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. So have you ever come off your line and you're like, oh crap, I really should have stayed? Or like once, like, but you got to go no matter what? Or like, how about the when you headed the ball against Portland? Like, what was that? What is that feeling for you as a goalie? I always feel like that's got to be like just a terrifying moment where you have to decide.
Yeah, I think the margin for us is a split second, and I think you just have to be confident in if you decide to go, you got to really fully commit to it. And I think on that play, I made the decision where I was going to go, and of course, being outside your box with in that kind of situation is definitely not an ideal situation where you want to see yourself in too many times. But I think the mindset is just to be able to make a play, and I think that was kind of my mindset. I know in that situation, most people are either going to try to not get past you or above you, and I think just making sure I'm trying to stay as big as possible. Obviously, was able to block it and go from that, but it's definitely not a situation I want to find myself in too often. And I know, something that's just like whatever decision you do make, you got to go in with the full conviction of it.
So what did Will Trapp reward you with after that? I hope it was something nice.
Nothing yet, but I'm sure that I might make a play, and he'll have my back in a different day. And so nothing yet, but he definitely did was very thankful for it for sure.
I know, I saw him like watching it as it was, unfolding after the ball turned over, and I was like, oh man, that's you hope it all comes full circle, right? That's the goal. What's better, like when you quiet an away crowd or the home roar at Allianz Field, like when you make a save? Like which one is better? I always think about that. Like, is it better to just like shut the opponent's crowd up, or does it feel better when like you come up with a big save and at Allianz and it just goes crazy?
I would say probably at Allianz, especially because it can be such a momentum shift. It can bring the fans into the game, and then all of a sudden, you know what I mean, the attack might start to go where you start to feel that confidence or that boost where it's like on the road, sometimes it's like you survive that play, but like you could know that, okay, like sometimes even if you make a great save, they might cheer because they're like, that's a big chance, and then they start to get the momentum. So I think obviously the fans play such a crucial role in our sport, especially at Allianz. I think they're amazing, and I think they've definitely given us momentum at times. I even think about something as simple as everyone waving the flags on a corner versus you start to feel that pressure of the thing that there's an expectation that we're going to be able to kind of create a good chance off of it.
When you look at how the season has gone and getting some more results at home, but also the vibe and kind of the energy, at least from what my perspective, and I'm not clearly there every day or inside the locker room, but that the expectation for real is higher. Like even when you guys get a result, it's like not necessarily satisfied if the game plan wasn't executed just right, or you're always knowing that there's some things that you can tweak, or we won a game, but I'm not happy with how we won the game. Like we need to do this, and this better. Does that jive with how you guys feel on the inside? My perspective on what it seems like on the outside?
Yeah, definitely. I think as competitors, you always want to be at your best. You know what I mean? But I think it's also important to kind of we're in a competitive business where if you play great every game but you lose every game, like you're not going to be happy. You know what I mean? So I think it is trying to find that balance of obviously playing well, but the results do matter for us too. So I think and there's going to be days where I think like Colorado where we don't play great, but we're able to get something out of the game to kind of push us forward. And then there's probably going to be games where we play great and we think that we deserve 3 points and we don't get them as well. So I think it goes hand in hand, but I think the expectation is just always wanting to get better and to improve and understanding that it's not strictly results based in terms of we want to, there's a bigger picture to it as well. You know what I mean?
Yep. And then also when you look at from your position on the field, what is like maybe the best thing that you've seen this season? Because you have like such an incredible vantage point of like, I was just thinking about that through ball the other day that Robin played to Sangbin, right? Or like if something happens in front of you, like, can you think of something where you're like you're from your spot, you're just watching and you're like, wow, that was sick. Or like you see something happening, developing. Do you ever have those moments?
I think there's probably two I think of. I think of Bongi's goal on the road away to win against Orlando because it starts off a goal kick. You see Jordan go for the flick, then Tanny gets it, plays it through, and it's like you feel connected to the play and scoring so late there, of course, after conceding a late goal for them to tie it and to be able to kind of continue the 3 points, especially for playing for Cam at that point in time where it was already we knew what the future was going to be, I think was a big one. And then the other one I think was the Columbus Tanny's goal because I was at like the halfway line because we're pushing off the long throw, you know what I mean? So I'm very high at the pitch, and it was nice to kind of be a part of the celebration in that moment. And I know how big the goal meant for him as well, and just to see him kind of gain the confidence from that game and continue on to the season that he's having right now, I think has been really nice to see.
And then also I would assume that, kind of like from one player that's been loaned out to another, maybe against what your expectation was for you in that moment of time, but then to come back and just like light it up, much like you did, right? I mean, you went on loan, maybe not your first choice at the moment, but you come back and you absolutely like just take hold of the starting position and don't let it go. I mean, Tanny's kind of done much the same, so I'm sure that's nice to see from another young player. What's your sort of impression or your overall thoughts or maybe a feeling since Eric Ramsey has taken over on now that you've had more time with him as the head coach that you can glean from him, his personality, his style? Like, what's your interpretation of it?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, he won the players over, and I think he's been very calm, cool, and collected in terms of he's never too high or too low. And I think that expectation of not just results based, but building on each game, and of course, not having a preseason as a coach is not a situation that you want to be in at all because you're trying to apply certain things. And I think also he's done a great job of looking at the roster and how we can get the best out of certain players because he didn't bring any of these players in, so he kind of was just giving them. So I think obviously in the summer, I'm sure that he probably has his eyes on a few players that he wants to bring in. But I think he's done a great job in terms of winning us over and really building on each game. And I think having clear, concise plans, but also having the same principles of the way we're going to play, regardless of the formation or things that we have, and just a clear game plan going into every game of execution.
When you say he's won the players over, he's got you guys to buy in. What does that mean? What does that look like? How does he do that?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, it's results. I think obviously if you have a certain game plan and the game plan works and allows us to get results, so I think one that, and then two, when you're putting guys in positions or situations where they feel very comfortable. Like I look at Joe, obviously he started playing left back kind of recently, but of course he played left mid a little bit for us last year. So can we find a hybrid for him in the system where he kind of does both and offensively gets the ball in good spots where he feels comfortable? I think that gives him a lot of confidence. You know what I mean? And then just for obviously for different players and just finding that confidence and having that belief of, okay, hey, we're going to rotate guys. And off the bench, I think that you can come in and be an impact. And you look at how many times our subs this year have come on and not just ran, but like have actually come in and impacted the game. And I think obviously that rotation does obviously help with some of the confidence in the squad where I know, okay, if I'm doing well in training or I get a little 30-minute cameo or 15 minutes, if I do well, I have a potential to start the next game as well. And I think that competition for places in the squad is definitely something that you want to have.
You tell Durkee to stop trying to get on camera. I see him just lingering back there. He's just trying to get more and more attention. Okay, how about this? Did you have any idea that Rosales was that fast? I mean,
Oh yeah,
I mean, holy cow, like he never gets beat on a run back. Like it's insane how many, and then he's doing it like the 90th minute. Like I'm actually shocked.
I like to think that it's because he hears me yelling at him, so that gives him the extra little boost there where he knows he needs to make it to the spot. But yeah, he definitely his pace from when he first joined was obviously something that we knew, but obviously he came as a center midfielder at first, so it's not very often that you really do hit your max speed like that in the system that we were playing at the time.
How many times do you have to yell at Curvin in a game when he's playing center back?
I yell at everyone probably equally the same, and I think sometimes it's just making sure that we're staying switched on and we're getting that momentum and guys are yelling at me. And I think especially some of the away crowds or even at Allianz, if the only way to hear each other is to yell at each other because sometimes it is so loud on the field. So I think it's definitely no hard feelings or anything like that, but sometimes just the most effective way for us to communicate, especially with the distances between us sometimes.
And I don't mean that as a negative. I just know I just remember when Curvin, when he plays midfield, he wants to do like everything all the time. So I kind of felt like, him playing center back keeps him a little bit more like he only has to think about sort of doing one thing. Otherwise, he's always trying to like go everywhere, do everything, and he's like stretched everywhere. So I didn't know if you just had to kind of keep him like focused on the fact that he's center back and he's not a center midfielder. So he's got to stay home a little bit as he gets all riled up in there. Lastly, what are you most looking forward to in Copa America?
Yeah, I think for me, it's the opportunity to win the position, and I think obviously the World Cup is 2 years away. So I think not having qualifiers is this is probably the biggest tournament that we're going to play in. Before that, of course, next year we have the Gold Cup, but to be able to kind of gain some of the experience against some of these South American teams and other CONCACAF teams as well. I think for me, it's the opportunity to go and claim this spot, and I think obviously that's definitely my goal going into the tournament.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Dayne. I appreciate you taking the time. Enjoy Los Angeles. Good luck. I know actually, lastly, are the Timberwolves going to win tonight? We're recording this on a Tuesday.
Hopefully, and I think I got faith in them. You know what I mean? So
Buy Game 5 tickets. I don't even know when Game 5 is, but
I think Game 5's Thursday when we get back. So we'll see. Hopefully they can give us some free tickets. You know what I mean? So
yeah, a little plug on the podcast. If they win Game 4 tonight, although I'm not feeling as good about it as I did to start the series. But yeah, that was my last question. I just wanted a prediction on that because I know you've been to a few T-Wolves game, you and Durkee in your time there. So thanks for taking the time today, Dayne. I really appreciate it. I know you guys got a busy schedule. Enjoy Los Angeles. Good luck in LA, and I will see you back here on Saturday.
Sounds good. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, everybody, for joining me for another episode of Sound of the Loons presented by Allina Health. We'll see you all again next week.